So good morning. Welcome to the service this morning. So this is our second week of our 4-week series on Absalom. And I think I owe some explanation about what we read and meditated last week, because there were some who were not able to attend the service. So what we looked at was a story about children of David. And a son, David has a son called Amnon, and he did something horrendous. And I believe, remember, so he disgraces his half-sister, Tamar, meaning he rapes her. And so here we go, our man, Absalom. And Absalom did something more horrible. He murders his half-brother, Amnon. That was our story. And we also briefly looked at the first 3 kings of Israel, Saul, David, and Solomon. And I wanna warm you up a little bit, our heart, our brain, our memory. So I want to tell you just recap of what each king represents. So Saul represents the love of obedience, and David the love of the Lord, the love of neighbor, and Solomon is someone we are ultimately aiming for, and he represents the love of the Lord. And it occurs to me, what is our life goal? Not naturally speaking, but spiritually speaking. Naturally speaking is easy. It's like getting something done, like for example, getting a driver license, for example, to begin with. Or it is pretty simple and plain. It is about getting rich, getting successful, or getting famous, probably on YouTube, something like that. But what about spiritually speaking? What is our ultimate goal? And I want to say this: to become a better person or a good person. And what I mean by a good person isn't someone who is naive, who is easygoing, or who is a yes man. What I mean by a good person is who is not motivated by our just lower feelings, like anger, lust, appetite, those things. But what I mean by a good person is someone who is governed by a good heart. Simple. But maybe in real life, it isn't that simple. We can experience a lot of different things because we are, what we are trying to really look at from the story. Do you remember our theme of our series? It is about crisis on the path to greatness. Yes, our ultimate goal is to become a better person, a good person, but we are going to experience a lot. Sometimes we make foolish judgments, reckless behaviors, and we are going to fall into temptation. And what we are seeing from Absalom is one of those bad examples. So we saw from last week, Absalom, in his behavior of going after his half-brother, Amnon, he seems to go after justice. But does he? We saw that he was actually he's going after revenge. And on a deeper level, Absalom represents the literal sense of the word, And in the context of the story, he represents how the literal sense of the word can be, in our mind, in our heart, partnered with evil desire. And it can be easily disguised in the pursuit of justice. And that is what we talked and meditated last time. And an example was like we take up a black and white principle, like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And we take that up and we use that to deal with our feelings. Like when someone gets on our nerve, get us being angry, and what we do is we're going to make sure they get the right consequence in a bad way. We want to make sure that the justice gets served in the form of revenge. And the story moves along. We are skipping chapter 14, but in that chapter, Absalom flees to Geshur, but with the help of Joab's delegation, is able to return to Jerusalem. And after 2 years, finally, King David forgives him. And our text for this morning is first part of chapter 15, which begins with Absalom's bigger desire. Now he wants to rise against his own father and be like a king. So I'm going to focus on this story for today. So Absalom, so it starts with Absalom preparing himself with chariots, horses, and 50 men to run before him. So what does it mean? He is gaining his own power. He is establishing his own army. And I think he's being bold. He's making a bold move. And do you know why we are being bold? When we are being bold than usual? When we are becoming more confident than usual? I think what we are seeing in the story is he's getting more confidence. And who knows, he might even think that he is now untouchable. So the fact that he's gaining more personal power can have a meaning or representation, or it reflects our mindset. That is, we are gaining more confidence. For example, that white and black principle that we draw from the word, it is okay. It is good. It is the way to do. Even though it is not what the Lord teaches us to do. He never tells us to revenge. Don't you remember the Lord saying in Matthew chapter 5? He says, I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. How about one of the 10 commandments? Don't murder. But we are easily blinded by our fallacy. And why we do that? Simple, because we love ourselves. We love our opinions. And so our wrong version of the word or interpretation of the word can it gets easily promoted. I mean, it should have been like this lower. This is almost, excuse my language, it's almost like rubbish or garbage. But it gets easily promoted to the ultimate truth. And that is what we are seeing in the story. So the first part of the story from verse 4 through 6 is about how Absalom, our first principle, appeals to the people of Israel. That means how it appears to us our whole mindset, our whole reasoning and thinking, and how it seizes our heart. And when we have that bigger picture in our mind, our reading of the text can be more understandable. So I'm going to read it again from verse 2 through 6. So it was, whenever anyone who had a lawsuit came to the king for decision, that Absalom would call to him and say, "What city are you from?" And he would say, "Your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your case is good and right, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you." Moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me," the false principle. "Then I would give him justice." And so it was, whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand, take him, and kiss him. In this manner, Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. And so Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So imagine how this is how a false principle we take from the literal sense of the word, and how it takes over our heart and mind, and how it becomes the judge of our spiritual life. So we've been looking at one specific example, and we might ask, are there more examples like that? Sure, there are. So we can read in the Word something along the lines with the need of an immediate execution of judgment on something or someone who is wrong. So for example, we read in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 9, that "For everyone who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death." I mean, isn't it too harsh? Can we take just one sentence literally alone? I mean, we all make mistakes. We might have said something disrespectful for our parents. And should we execute it for that? Is that something what God, the Lord, wants? I think the problem arises when we are trying to be just straight. Sometimes we try to be straight with the lines or the word, and our mind can go with the way of, okay, let's bring justice down and let judgment or justice get served. We can easily fall into that. And there are just tons and tons of examples like that, but we might have heard something in the church. Like, "Oh, you don't attend church services. You don't keep the Sabbath. And we wouldn't call you as a member of the church. You don't belong to here." How mean it is to say that. But the real issue for us is the question, is it really okay for us to be mean, to be a jerk like that? The real question is whether it is okay to be merciless like that just because we are trying to seek justice. So what happens is we become senseless about the most important teachings of all. And what are they? As we know, there are two things that are most important that the Lord is teaching: the love of the Lord and the love of neighbor. And we forget all about that. We are just fixated at one passage, and we're going to say, "Oh, I can be harsh. So, Absalom is going to hand us over an easy key to solve problems. And it will be appealing because it is simple, plain, and most of all, it is going to reach out to our self-righteousness. We are different from them. We are better than them. And that is how it is appealing so easily. One more last thing that stands out in the story is, where is David? In the story, where is David? I mean, he is the king who is supposed to rule the king, and he knows everything. But we are missing. I mean, he is mentioned in our story, but we don't really see and feel his presence. And as you remember, he represents the love of the neighbor. And I think what the story tells us is, when Absalom takes our heart like that, meaning a false principle and being merciless and being a jerk like that, we are missing David's presence in our life. How about that? And the rest of the story in chapter 15 is about David fleeing from Jerusalem because now his son Absalom takes over his kingdom. And we are going to look at more closely the rest of it next week. So I'd like to wrap it up for today. And I want us to go back to the bigger message. Crisis on the path to greatness. So definitely, we are going to meet our own version of Absalom, or we already have met him. And then, what can we remember in those times? We can remember that he is not the king. He is the rebel. Amen.